on one line there. So there's a couple of things we can see here. That first line, line 44, it says HTTP post. That's a way of marking a method and only allowing it to be called on a post. So what you can do is you can have a method that has the same name. You can have overloads. So you actually have two methods called create, one for the get and one for the post. So you can have /album/create as a route, and it'll go to the right method based entirely on whether it's a get or a post, which is kind of cool. And he goes and he says, try to add this album to album, save the changes, and then if it fails, look what he does there on line 59. He's got a view model. So there's two interesting things here. One is there's the philosophical argument of people who think you should always pass in a view model, meaning a customized object with just the stuff that your view needs. And then there's the when I really just have no choice and I have to do it. So in this case, his create page, when an error happens, needs to know more about stuff than just one object. He needs to know about the album, but he also needs a list of genres, and he needs a list of artists. So he makes a composite object that is a view model. Except, again, the people who care about this stuff would argue that, but he's just passing in database objects within another object, and they still are attached to the database, which is true. And you have to decide for yourselves as you start designing applications how fervent you want to buy into that argument. Okay, on the one side, there's just get your objects the way you want them and pass them to the view. And those objects will very likely be from the database or they'll be from wherever. Then there's the model that this thing takes, which is pass those objects to the view when they look exactly like what you need. And then if you need something special, make a view model and stick those objects inside. And then getting kind of more and more to the extreme, not necessarily where extreme is bad, but where it's just going to cost you more work, is make custom objects for every single thing and copy from the model into the view model. So I would have an album, and then I'd have a album view model. So for every single kind of object, and then I would go copy, 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 copy. For simple applications, that might be a lot of what I call left-hand, right-hand code. Album dot first, album dot title equals view model, album dot title. Da, 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 da. For advanced scenarios, you might use a tool called Auto Mapper, which is a tool that uses kind of reflection and looks at two objects and goes, and then it does that. It makes that noise too when it does it, and it'll figure it out. And Auto Mapper is cool for other things where you have an object that has like first name and last name, and another one has first name and surname, and you want them to map together, and Auto Mapper can be configured to do those kind of things. But again, it's a big philosophical discussion. It's going to create a lot more code for you. Now, what John did in this application, which is kind of a middle of the road, is he created a models, views, and view models. So at least he kept them somewhere. He gave them all a convention. This is not something specific to MVC. It's more of a philosophical discussion. But they're really simple objects. Right? A shopping cart has a list of cart items. In this case here, he made a details one that only includes album. This is where I think it gets a little weird. And this is, again, up for you to decide, but it's something to think about. The salient point is, though, you need to pass in information into your view that lets the view do its job. And it's really important to remember that the view's job is only to display stuff. It's not to do calculations. It's not to think about things. Views should be limited to basically for loops and the occasional if. I'll show you let's look at a couple of his views. So details, spit out a link, spit out the model. Index for each list of genres and genres. All right? It's that kind of stuff. If you find yourself doing tax calculations inside of a view, stop. That is not the view's job. What you would do is that you would then do that calculation in the controller. Maybe if it was a shopping cart, right? Let's say you have a shopping cart object. You'd total those up and pass the shopping cart stuff with the total and whatever additional information into a view model and then pass that along for the ride. if the data isn't pre-chewed by the time that gets to the view, it needs to be. The view's job is not to make those calculations. Does that make sense? It's an interesting discussion because it also allows you to reuse those views. You can have strongly typed views, like in this case where John has a view of type store index view model, but you can also have now in ASP.NET MVC view of type dynamic. And you can so it's like a just-in-time object that you can use. There's also the notion of a view data, which we used earlier here. There's a lot of prescriptive guidance in MVC, but there's a lot of places where we just can't make the decision for you, and you have to figure it out. Now, view data is a place where you can stick something like a hash table, and it'll be on the other side. So in this example, I say view data, and I pass in message. I put a bit of text in that inside of home index. Oops. Let's go over to index. And then we pull it out again here. I find that a little uncomfortable. I don't really like that. It might be convenient for passing the occasional string out. It's kind of like a trapdoor that you can use to get yourself out of a tight situation, but it's not something you'd want to use on a regular basis because you're just throwing some data into something with a string key. But if you've got an existing view and you've already got it working and you just need one additional piece of information, I could see where someone could potentially use it. But as with all things that use strings, that's still going to compile. And you're never going to know until it goes bad for you. Which brings me to another point about views. In this example here, we're using a view engine. View engines are the thing that generates the angle brackets. And you have the choice to use multiple view engines, although most people never know that anything else exists other than what we come with. This is called the WebForms view engine. And this is an unfortunate name because it makes you think that WebForms is involved somehow. But the idea is that we needed a view that you could express your HTML in and some of your code. We needed designer support. We needed a nice editor. We had all of that already lying around with WebForms. So is this a web form, this index.aspx, kind of technically under the covers? Except, this is really important, there's no postbacks. You can't even count on there being events. And what do you notice about the ones that are sitting there on the right-hand side in the Solution Explorer? The little plus sign that you're used to seeing that has a code behind? There are no code behinds in these. So, you're smart people, so you can get this, but maybe your coworkers won't, so you might need to explain it to them. It looks like an ASPX. It's called the WebForms view engine, but don't think of it like that, because it's just not. This is just a view engine that knows how to generate angle brackets, and it looks and feels like WebForms. Some people will try to put a code behind in there. But think about all we've learned so far and how a code behind would break the single responsibility principles. Think about all the evil that you could